Hey there, welcome to episode 122 of the Let's Innovate for Vegas audio program. I am your host, Managing Director of the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, Dan Hugo. We are recording this at 1 p.m. on Monday, June 16, 2025. As usual, we publish on Tuesday, so this episode will be published and made available on June 17th, Tuesday, June 17th, 2025. Today we are talking about Forkening 2025. What is that? We'll get to it. I promise. If you have not heard of or listened to this audio program, or heard of the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, we are a Nevada nonprofit, 501c3 public charity. Our purpose is to enable and encourage ideation, innovation, and implementation to make our communities better. Those communities could be somewhere in the greater Vegas area or beyond. The greater Vegas area is known to draw a crowd from many places on the planet. So the greater Vegas community could be as large as that, maybe even larger. Who knows? We are a civic volunteer organization. Civic tech, which some people have heard of, it's sort of still a thing, is something of a subset. So we do civic tech, but we do some other stuff. Those are the plans anyway. We're about to turn 3 years old in fiscal years, 3 fiscal years old at the end of this month. So we formed in 2022, it's 2025, 3 years. Anyway, we incorporated in June, actually it was June 16th, come to think of it. So June 16th, 2022. And so here we are, 2025. So on the 30th, we'll file our third 990. Our 3-year $50,000 gross receipts cap will be done from our 1023 EZ filing. All kinds of little nuances, I suppose, but we're still at it. We're still going. Here we are, episode 122. So there you go. Let's Innovate for Vegas Foundation, 100% civic volunteer, no compensation, financial compensation for anyone. So it's all long tail. So on that note, we were originally the Code for Vegas Code for Vegas, then Code for Vegas Foundation when we incorporated, then we renamed to Innovate for Vegas Foundation. So here you go. So I'll describe the Forkening soon. Hopefully wherever you found this audio program, you're able to locate the episode description, which contains the show notes, a brief summary that I will read to you, the usual 4 links, although soon there will be more. So I'll have to figure out the best way to share like the top level link, I suppose. And then we'll get on with the show. So the summary of today's episode, the original Forkening effort was implemented to provide an on-ramp of sorts for coders, in keeping with our Code for Vegas origins, and creators who may have felt not being coders was an issue. It was not, but some people felt it was. It's understandable. We have since reimagined that with our rename and some restructuring. Now we need to be more obvious about our foundation itself. The Innovate for Vegas Foundation homepage at the moment is innovate4, F-O-R, Vegas.org. So Innovate for Vegas, one word, spelled out, F-O-R, not the number 4. Innovate, F-O-R, Vegas, period, O-R-G. There you will find the basic information about our nonprofit, some various business IDs and incorporation dates and so on, as well as our initiatives and policies and so on, contributing policies and so-called community health documents and information. So that's kind of the one-stop shop for our foundation. We'll get into what that means moving forward. It's not bad. It's all fine. It's all good. The next link, projectact.info. That's project hyphen. The hyphen is next to the 0 on most keyboards. ACT.info. That stands for Autonomous Cohort Tessellation. It's a discovery platform. The initiative is all about being discovered as a cohort of civic volunteers, perhaps, although we don't need to limit it to that. The tessellation is a mosaic, so discovery and visibility to enable and encourage connection, communication, and collaboration. projectact.info. That is a separate GitHub organization. That website is as it is at the moment, is hosted as a GitHub Pages site, and it is intended to be a point of collaboration on tools and methods for discovery and all the things I just described. So projectact.info. We'll eventually try to get the word out even more about that. agileforvolunteers.org. Once again, agile, F-O-R, volunteers. So just like our main site, spelled out, agile, A-G-I-L-E, for volunteers.org, I should say. That is our reimagining of the agile methodology designed by and for software engineers, programmers, that were working 40-hour plus work weeks as programmers for companies. So some of the things that we can take from there: whole team, user stories, co-creation efforts involving our users, our customers, the people we are trying to service with our efforts, all of our team members and so on, not only participate, but get full credit for their efforts. And using the user story methodologies, no stand-up meetings, but we're trying to adapt the things that work in the agile methodology for software and non-software efforts, initiatives, and component projects, and also for people who are not paid to do their work. So volunteers, as we are. So agileforvolunteers.org, also a work in progress. Hopefully others will give it a try as it becomes fully functional, and we'll see where we can make it even better. Finally, the mastodon.vegas link, Mastodon for Vegas. As I've said last week, we are getting now very close to the time when we can actually use Mastodon.vegas as a donation driver. Hopefully people will see the value of a geographically focused social media platform that will interoperate with other Fediverse platforms. We can use it as a starting point for some of our other efforts, including the MyMuni and Welcome initiatives, which will lean heavily into the Fediverse and decentralization and interoperability with ActivityPub and so on and so on and so on. So I like to mention that link just so that there's a little bit of momentum once we actually kick it off. We'll see how that works out. And now on with the show. So I mentioned the Forkening. So what was that? I've mentioned it many times, actually. But if you are new to this channel, you may never have heard of it. When we rebooted Code for Vegas as the standalone 501c3 organization, Code for Vegas Foundation, and that was back in 2022, several people would ask whether they would be welcomed if they were not coders, which is understandable. It's in the name, right? Code for Vegas. Legacy. It was part of our naming legacy. It was important to carry forward the history of civic volunteerism from the original open data project that was executed in collaboration between City of Las Vegas, the Code for America, and Code for Vegas at the time. That was about a decade ago. It was not great, though, to maintain that naming legacy at the expense of interested people feeling unwelcome. So in keeping with city branding, we're going to be a global innovation hub after all. The Innovation District, there's a site owned by the City of Las Vegas called innovate.vegas. It connects their international innovation centers with the Innovation District, with the Mayor's Pilot Fund or something. There's a few different resources that all fall under the Innovate umbrella. So Innovate for Vegas seemed to fit nicely as a rename, and so we did. The original idea of the Forkening then was to split Code for Vegas, so codeforvegas.org, into a public-facing Code for, C-O-D-F-O-R, .vegas, and an equally public-facing Create for .vegas, Create F-O-R, Vegas, which would represent two different public entrances, if you will, that would meet up in the inside to collaborate. I used a photo of a fast food restaurant, the KFC Taco Bell doublet, a single standalone building with two different entrances, one called KFC, one called Taco Bell, owned by the same company. I don't know if it's Yum Foods that owns Pepsi, which owns these, but either way. So you could enter either entrance, whichever appealed to you, but you would still order from the same counter, same kitchen, preparing the food. You could order from both menus. Similarly, you could be a coder and a creator or whatever else. It was sort of a simplification to have just two entrances. Really, you could view yourself as any number of things in our universe. So we went with 2, but we didn't really go very far with it. Coders, creators, everybody working together, but with a focused online presence for each. In a perfect world, the coders would implement cool website features for each of the 2 sites, while the creators would design logos, user interfaces, content, messaging, and so on. So basically just collaboration. And then our boring old codeforvegas.org website would be our foundation business site. Makes sense. Once our rename to Innovate for Vegas Foundation was complete, and with an eye on a flexible future, we acquired the for.vegas, that's FOR.Vegas domain name, so that we could build anything around this notion, whether code.for.vegas, create.for.vegas, volunteer.for.vegas, whatever else comes to mind. This is where the original Forkening rests at the moment. So we didn't pursue the 2 entrances model. We instead kind of pivoted a little bit into the any number of so-called entrances. But we still had the innovateforvegas.org foundation website. But the innovateforvegas.org domain is where you would visit to find out information not only about our foundation and governance and IRS, charitable foundation status information, nonprofit business ID, all the details of our foundation, as well as the initiatives, component projects, participants, policies, etc. So it's kind of holding all of the weight of our organization. So now we arrive at the Forkening 2025. Well, we have been a Nevada nonprofit for 3 years, come 30 June, as I said, this month. We will enter our 4th year with some optimism, of course, but we also need clarity as well. It has become apparent that the foundation, the business side, and its civic volunteer initiatives, the activity side, and the pursuit of those initiatives might be confused or confusing. They might even be conflated as all one big thing. And technically they are, but it really comes down to, if I'm volunteering, what am I volunteering for? And if I'm looking for who's volunteering for things, do I want to look on the business side, like board members and governance and committees or any such things? Or am I looking at the people that are actually working on the initiatives? And by the way, one person can be in both. So it's not a hard line. But for clarity, our all volunteer organization, it just leads to a mismatch of expectations if we're not careful and transparent about that. In simplest terms, a lack of clarity in a way our organization is structured can just be confusing, and we don't need that. We have had our single domain for the Innovate for Vegas Foundation, which is the general entry point and source of authoritative information for both our foundation and our cohorts of civic volunteers. So our one super cohort with any number of teams or cohorts within. This is reasonable, it works, but this is the modern era, and it is so easy, it is easy enough anyway, to have a particular online presence that is located and designed with purpose and clarity in mind, or more than one. The plan then is to leave the organization unchanged. So this is not a reorg of our foundation, but to split the online presence of our foundation and our cohort of civic volunteers, and then the initiatives that they're working on, so that they are 2 digitally different locations online, each with its own URL and content and whatnot, not to mention email addresses and any other, administrata. Essentially, the business of our foundation as a Nevada nonprofit corporation versus the activities of our foundation in the form of initiatives and the volunteers who will make them go. So now the details. First, the .org, innovateforvegas.org. That's the domain we've had since the beginning. Once we renamed in October of 2022, so it was pretty quick. We're not even the Innovate for Vegas Foundation. Oh, no, I'm sorry. No, we received our determination in 2022, and we started talking about the rename. And then I think it was in October of 2023 that we actually received our final rename paperwork from the IRS. We had already renamed with the state, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, sorry, got that date wrong. There's a whole timeline that we host in our GitHub repo on the .org organization, so we can make that more clear by splitting that away and making it some foundation details. I'm getting ahead of myself. The .org website is essentially where one might go to learn about our initiatives and component projects, our cohort of teams, and their volunteer time, effort, and expertise, documentation for onboarding, basically joining our cohort and or a particular initiative internally or externally, and so on and so on. Because of the way GitHub and similar platforms, I think, enable organization and per repository web content, this scheme unchanged will grow with website access to our various initiatives and documentation and whatnot, co-located with our actual work repositories and progress. So the GitHub Pages website that you can visit with your browser, and all the content for the website is essentially coming from the same place as all the project work, all the initiative work. Everything is a repository. Repositories can have pages content that would appear as part of a website, whereas you can also visit the repositories themselves through a web browser or using GitHub or Git tools. So it kind of does double duty. A person interested in the initiatives we are working on could visit innovateforvegas.org as a starting point and could eventually find themselves visiting a GitHub repository URL directly if they wanted to. But everything being sort of proximal makes that very convenient from a maintenance standpoint and for just publishing across all of our initiatives, progress, bug reports, issues, and discussions and all that. So it kind of keeps it under one big umbrella. So yeah, everything's co-located and easy to manage, you could say. The GitHub organization, Innovate for Vegas, is a GitHub for nonprofits tiered presence. So in other words, if you visit github.com/Innovate for Vegas, you will find an organization with many, many repositories. There should be tons more. It is a free tier, a GitHub for nonprofits free teams tier, I should say. So we have all the gratis access to GitHub Teams features across all of our repositories in the Innovate for Vegas organization on GitHub, which you can reach as a normal website, innovateforvegas.org. So if you visit that URL, you are landing in what is essentially where volunteers would find out what projects we're working on, if they want to contribute, what are our initiatives, how do they all kind of fit together. That's a work in progress to make that clear. But either way, the .org will essentially be the landing place or the entry point for people who want to know what it is we are doing. It's handy now and will become more useful and even consequential as we grow our participation within our cohort and between ours and other cohorts and organizations. So basically our .org URL and our existing GitHub setup will continue as is, and that is the place you would go. What are they working on? What are they trying to build? Could we collaborate? Is there some way I can contribute, donate, etc.? So that all essentially unchanged. There is, however, some foundation information. I mentioned the timeline of our organizational, I call it legal. There's a document called legal. And if you visit that, it's not really, it's not directly visible, but I've linked to it if people have any questions about our history, our business history. So that is a foundation detail. It's not really material for someone who wants to work on an initiative or just has questions about what do I need to do to collaborate or contribute to a component project, etc. So we can split all that out into innovateforvegas.foundation. So we have that domain. Nothing is there yet, so don't visit it just yet. I'll announce when it's actually launching. I literally just got the domain today. So the Nevada Nonprofit Corporation and a 501c3 public charity, those are the foundation details that are not super interesting if you just want to work on a civic volunteer component project initiative. Maybe you want to suggest a new one. This means governance, business roles, annual filings, and all the other stuff with the Nevada Secretary of State, the 990 filings with the IRS, and so on and so on. By splitting the business of our foundation from the activities of our foundation, we can tailor our online presence accordingly with financials around donations and sponsorships, any collaborations and partnerships with our local and non-local friends and agencies, news and announcements, and so on, without cluttering or confusing the volunteer initiative and component project efforts, and vice versa, right? If I'm a business entity or a government entity or another organization that's curious about, okay, are they a legitimate Nevada nonprofit corporation? What's their business ID and so on? That person may not be in the mindset of, let me see what this open transit is, right? So obviously they'll be cross-linked. That's not the goal here, is to confuse or obscure, but it is to provide a sort of a clarity, a transparency. This is the business side. This is how we maintain our foundation, our paperwork, our filings, our financials, etc. Email addresses. The board of directors should be viewed as members of the business, not necessarily members of civic volunteer component project effort, although they could be in both. So we can tailor our online presence and make it clear who and what we are doing to a particular audience. Someone looking for business, tax, and governance information about our foundation can visit our .foundation site and find those data without navigating around the cohort activities, initiative repo links, and other information found on our .org website. And again, once we migrate to this new scheme, which should not take too long, those are always famous last words. But we now have a plan in place to move forward. So this will hopefully allow some unfolding of this idea in a timely manner. But we don't stop there. Don't stop listening. The .dev, one more, not so obvious. The .dev, the innovateforvegas.dev URL, which will point to our online tooling and other resources that are not appropriate or simply not usable in the GitHub Pages environment. So where we can publish, a static list of initiatives, descriptions, who's working on what, open bugs and issues, progress, project, iteration, information, discussions, all that stuff is enabled within the GitHub feature set. But if we want to run, the starting point will be self-hosted tools like Excalidraw, Penpot, a listserv for mailing lists, and other such things. So anything we want to do dynamically or have full programmatic control of, we want to deploy something interesting or useful, innovateforvegas.dev. And it doesn't have to be just software tools. It could be CAD if we're going to do some sort of architectural or mechanical. It could be content tools. It could be any number of things. Maybe even a Git employment. Git, Gitea, is like an open source version of GitHub. So we could do that. Whatever else we might need to make work on our various initiatives, quote, easier, unquote. Another famous last word. It's overused sometimes, that word, but basically we can have a parallel online toolbox that connects to our existing GitHub presence, but which does not necessarily depend on GitHub features alone as the .org site does. So yes, you can have applications running and so on, but essentially the innovateforvegas.org website and the Innovate for Vegas organization on the GitHub platform right now has a collection of features. We can sort of dovetail on that and host anything else we might want to do, including if we want or need to deploy a development version of something, maybe make a distribution version of documentation or other component project elements usable for demonstration or testing. Whatever we want to do, we can mirror our repository structure in our GitHub organization onto our .dev. Anybody who's ever done the GitHub.dev trick to open up a VS Code web editor session, it could be similar to that. So our .org URL can be mirrored into our .dev URL sitemap, if you will, to enable whatever sort of creativity we need. Not only code, by the way, so sky's the limit. Time to be flexible and adopt some modernity. And the other pieces, our existing initiative URLs like challengers.vegas, for.vegas, and others, vlocal.vegas, there are more, remain as is. So those are not changed. Those are still yet to be populated, but they are essentially deployment endpoints. So we will build the Challengers initiative and launch it at challengers.vegas, and that's where it will function. So it's merely a deployed initiative at that point. The big change here makes explicit the thin, gray, but still present dividing line between the business of maintaining our foundation and the activities of our foundation civic volunteer participants affiliated with our foundation, whatever that affiliation is. So our stewardship of agileforvolunteers.org and that initiative and projectact.info and that initiative continue as is. These two initiatives make sense to host, at least in part, on GitHub because we invite others to participate in directing and developing these for the larger population who might benefit from either or both of them. So there may be an opportunity to grow what we do with these with others in collaboration. At the moment, they are completely useful in their present deployed hosted state as GitHub pages, sites, and then GitHub organizational resources, right? Accounts on GitHub as organizations with repositories and so on and so on. There may be some other things on the horizon which will fit into this scheme, basically falling under the business side of our org chart or the initiative side. So it's either going to be business or day-to-day work, I guess you could say, all under the foundation corporation, but functionally different. Expectations would be different. What kind of information am I looking for? If I'm looking for tax ID, Nevada business ID, that's a foundation matter. Tell me more about the documentation for the Open Transit Initiative. That's a .org topic. So clearly two entrances get you to the same organization, but you have different menus, not unlike the original Forkening idea. So Forkening 2025 is about making clear the business versus the activities of the business. Our foundation is 100% volunteer, so everybody is a civic volunteer. Production by Street. So not to say that the members of the Foundation side of the world, email addresses, communication, information sharing, documentation publishing, policies, etc., civic volunteers, but civic volunteers on the .org side are basically not concerning themselves with, did we file our 990? You can find out. That will all be on the .foundation site, but really more of a focus on that side about, progress, bug reports, discussion, changes, updates, day-to-day, iterations, teams, team members, giving credit for for work done. That will be much more granular and interesting, I suppose, on the .org side. If you're a contributor to the foundation, you're a member of the board of directors, you're in the governance or helping out on a committee or an external advisor, that's a little bit easier to just say, yes, here are people that contributed to the success of our foundation. But if you have people writing bugs, submitting bugs, fixing bugs, creating new bugs, authoring documentation, creating features and user stories and building things that are either software or not software. That's one lens to see the world through. Those are people that are going to contribute in a variety of ways, and we want to make sure everybody gets credit. So the .org side will be focused much more on day-to-day contribution to the initiatives and people doing that kind of work. On the foundation side, will be more about people kind of helping to steer, oversee, guide, direct, etc. So it's a different type of participation, but valuable nonetheless. And anyone in the governance side of the foundation is of course welcome to participate on the activity side, and vice versa. Had to get some water there. You can hear my voice is totally failing. The weather today is weird, and my sinuses are weird as well. So we're getting to the end of it. Similarly, some of our resources will fall under the business side, some on the initiative side. So the people could be on one side or the other. Some of our other resources will fall under, the Challengers Project is probably under the .org side. We may have a business relationship that might fall under the foundation side. These are details. There's really no reason to not be completely transparent as those things roll out. I honestly don't know what those things will be at the moment, other than some of the sites that I mentioned, Challengers for the local, what's another one? There are a few. Talks on Vegas. So that would be Talks.Vegas might actually be like a foundation thing, because we would want to be supportive of as a charitable organization, we would want to support a community resource like Talks is intended to be, to tell the stories of people of the greater Vegas area. So it's not necessarily a project that people are working on. It would be a website and hosted content, but it's really like a real world interaction with people in our communities. So that's probably more of a foundation resource than a .org resource, if that makes sense. They all fall under the same Nevada Nonprofit Corporation. So it'd just be a matter of how we reference things and how we link them together and where we talk about them and point people from and to and so on. These are all works in progress. So some of the things I've described here may be tuned up a little bit, maybe clarified, but that's the general idea, is to make the two sides, the two entrances to our foundation a little bit more obvious. People that are good enough with their time to contribute that to our time and effort and expertise to governing our organization as members of our board, for example, would be, sort of conceptually part of innovateforvegas.foundation email and profile, business card links and whatnot, whatever you want to call that. Whereas people that are contributing to projects and initiatives, that are participating in iterations, that are filing bugs and so on, that's on the .org site. So it does all make sense when you really step back, give it a think. Oh, okay, yes. There's the business and then the day-to-day. And that's basically the idea. So I just spent a little over 30 minutes describing something that probably would take one sentence to really detail. The .dev version, or presence, will probably be the more interesting to deploy as we figure out what works and how to make it work, as I kind of described here. That's very definitely a work in progress, but yeah, we'll see what happens. On that note, I thank you for listening and putting up with my my squeaky voice today. I don't know what's going on. I've done my usual thing with trying to make my voice work better. It was working yesterday. Who knows what tomorrow will bring. Thank you for listening as always. Thank you for keeping an eye on the Innovate for Vegas Foundation. And this podcast will still be found in the usual places. And we'll see what happens next. Take care. Until next week.